Welcome to our cybersecurity session organized by NTC. As we have been organizing a number of courses to develop the cyber skills or cyber capacity. So I thought it would be useful to whether it's past participants or future participants to have a high overall perspectives about cybersecurity and understanding what are the level of depth in terms of mathematics or engineering knowledge that will be needed for someone to understand cybersecurity. And that's why we organize this session as a panel discussion. Together with me today, we have Professor Tianwei, we have Professor Li Yi, and we have Dr. Sourav. And most of the talk today will be given by them. As usual, I'm here to give the opening and welcome. So maybe I give the time to Dr. Sourav. He helps moderate these sessions and steer the discussion. And one of the things that we are especially keen to cover is to address how technical it could be in order for someone to understand and work on cybersecurity. Okay, Sourav.
Thank you, Prof. Hello, everyone. I think some of you who had been in the previous session of our series might have seen me. I delivered a session in that specific course. It was a 3-hour session on applications of cryptology. And then I hear from the participants, as well as I hear a lot from our students at the School of Computer Science and Engineering, where I'm a lecturer, or even at NTU, that, okay, if I'm planning to take cybersecurity as a technical elective, as an elective focus, or as a specialization, then how technical it really is, right? So can I switch jobs and get into cybersecurity? Or how technical would it be for me to learn cryptology? How mathematical it is, and so on and so forth. So that's why we planned to have this session more as an open discussion. I see about 38 participants. That's great. And it would be lovely if you may keep us posted on your questions, on your queries. We'll discuss a little bit. Professor Tianwei is with us today. He generally talks about system security from NTU perspective. So he teaches at NTU on these areas. He's also going to be one of our primary instructors for system security in this course series by NTC. I'll ask him soon enough how technical details he is going to cover and how technical it would be. Same for Prof. Li Yi, who teaches application security, software security. He's going to talk about blockchain security in this course series. He's also going to be our primary instructor for application security. The same question, we'll ask how technical it would get. Prof. Lam talks about cybersecurity as a very broad spectrum. So if you were there in his session, or if you have had the chance of listening to him earlier, you know that cybersecurity is not just cryptology, or not just systems, or not just applications. It's a far broader area than that. All right. So again, be a part of this discussion. We'll pause in between. Feel free to ask questions. If I give a pause and I ask for questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question at that stage. You can always post your comments and questions in the chat box, right? Okay, so to start with, as I welcomed Prof. Tianwei and Prof. Li Yi from the School of Computer Science and Engineering NTU, let me ask Tianwei. Tianwei, you would teach system security as a part of this course series. So yes. What are the aspects you are going to cover, and how technical would it really be for the participants to learn it? Can somebody not having enough background still come in and learn it?
Sure, definitely. So generally, because we will discuss some concepts and also like the applications of the security in the systems. So it would be great if you have some basic knowledge about the computer systems. This includes like the operating systems and also the networking systems, even the underlying hardware systems. But if you have less experience or the expertise in this direction, so this is also totally okay. So in this course, I will give an introduction about these system operations. So, and then based on this, you will have a better understanding about the security vulnerabilities and also protections in these systems. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tianwei. So when our students take system security or computer security as a course, we ask them to take maybe something like operating systems or a systems course beforehand. Do you think it's feasible for someone as a practitioner to come into this field and get used to that idea very soon so that they can learn it?
Yeah, I think so. At the beginning of this course, I will give like a brief introduction about the operating systems. So this will be easier for people to understand the following course materials.
Great, understood. Thanks, Tianwei. So let me move to Lee. So this is a slightly different area. Lee, you are going to teach application security, right? So
Yeah, that's
more
correct.
web applications or more of email and other things? What would be your focus?
Okay, so application security is also a really broad area. And I would say it's much closer to our everyday life. So don't take it personally, Tianwei. So system security, in order to understand it, you need to understand some low-level stuff like OS, networks, and so on. But applications, when we talk about application, it means, for example, these mobile apps you're running on a mobile phone, those websites that you open from your browser, and we'll be looking at issues like phishing, like those email links you got from email where you don't know whether you should click or not, and ransomware. For example, I think you've heard about this, like the WannaCry ransomware. So you click on something, then you got a virus, and now this virus encrypt everything, every file in your computer, and it asks for you to pay a few Bitcoins in order to get those files unlocked. And also like cross-site scripting. So this is more related to web applications. For example, you get this alert boxes when you open some unknown website, and you always get this this very annoying ads. So those are all covered by application security. Of course, in order to know how it works in very detailed fashion, then we will be covering some basics on how, for example, web application, how mobile application works underneath. I mean, based on everyone's interest, you can always get something out of this course.
Great. We just received a question from a participant. So when you teach, would you be teaching almost like an NTU course? So would it be more textbook oriented, or do you think it would be more towards the industry side so that the practitioners can learn something from it hands-on?
Yeah, of course. We have different version of this course. So in my software security course, I teach in NTU. I will be cover a lot of theories, like for you to understand how these attacks, vulnerability works underneath. But for this offering, I would tailor it to the taste of practitioners. So I would do less theory, but more practical stuff.
Right.
I will show, of course, for example, show more examples, do some demos to make it more accessible.
Understood. So somebody who is going to learn this from you for the first time, let's say, has some background but wants to learn application security, would they be able to follow with the hands-on things and learn on their own after this?
Sure. So I think the purpose of my course is to get you started. So within the 3 hours or 6 hours, it's not possible to cover every aspect. So I would be mainly focused on first the fundamentals of application security. So this covers, for example, some basic concept like what does asset mean? What does threats or vulnerability means? So get you to understand all these basic concepts. And then I will be covering threat modeling. So which is to, for your organization or for your particular software application, what are the potential threats from the outside world? Like, so this, you have to do it in a case-by-case manner. So it will be different for mobile app or different for web app. So I will be teaching some techniques to do this threat modeling. I'll also be talking about some techniques to do security measurement, meaning that I'll be talking about some metrics you can use to measure how secure your system is and what are the level of risk that you're facing. So those kind of things. So I think those basic knowledge are really useful for you to start your own self-learning afterwards.
Right. Thanks, Steve. I think that makes sense. So for example, I am going to talk about more network security. So I'm going to give a session on the network security aspect. What I feel is in cryptology, for example, I come from a cryptology background. It's a lot of math and a lot of basic constructions and algorithms. But when I do say network security, or when I talk about network security in practice, it doesn't really matter if you know all those details of the math, but rather it's putting them together in a protocol and how things work. Like when I'm talking about, say, TLS as a 1.3 TLS 1.3 protocol, I really care about what the handshake protocol looks like, what are the packets transferred, how do you even go from the handshake through the public key infrastructure, and then you start the record protocol, which ciphers you use, and things like that. So it's more of the standards and practices, and sometimes we get to use those as black boxes, the ciphers. We don't go into details of those algorithms. Would it be the same in system security? Would it be more for some demos and practitioner oriented? Tianwei?
Yeah, in this course we do not have like hands-on experiments, but to make it more industry oriented, we will introduce some real security incidents happening in the real world. So people will get more familiar with the security vulnerabilities and the possible defenses in the OS from a perspective of reality. And also as so basically, it is similar to the networking security. So here we do not need to understand how very fully understanding about the details of this different security mechanism, like a crypto, like the access control, like the authentication. But what we want to do is to help people know the basic properties of these security mechanisms, and also how to apply this mechanism into the system for better protection without compromising the performance or the usability. So this is the goal we want to achieve in our course.
Right. Yes, Xiaofang, sorry, your mic is on, I think. All right. Okay, great. Thanks, Tianwei. So I also understand, Tianwei, that you are going to talk about system security in the first day of the system security course. But on the second day, we have Mr. Tanken Bun. He has been teaching systems, cyber physical systems, and smart card security at NTU for some time, but he comes from the industry point of view. So he told me that his smart card teaching would be more from practical smart card tokens till going into maybe wallets, so card wallets for banks, and how everything is put together. So I think it would also connect how you build out something for the real world, if you know the cyber physical aspects, right?
Yes, so basically on first day we will talk about the security issues in the general operating systems, and then in the second day we will consider specific systems like the IoT system, like embedded systems. So this will be from the a general case to a more specific cases.
Right. So when you say IoT, then may I just ask? So if you're saying it's an IoT system, so would you connect it to maybe the practical scenarios of, say, a smart factory, or how an IoT system is deployed in the real world?
Yeah, so IoT system is a very broad concept because we have different types of IoT systems in our daily life, like in our smart homes, and it can also be widely used in the industry, and also even in smart nations. So we have different types of IoT devices with different functionalities. So it is very hard to give a very accurate definition on these devices. So generally compared to the traditional computing systems like our PCs, like our cloud servers. So the IoT system generally they have relatively lower performance of our processors, and also they mainly designed for one specific purpose. So these unique features will require some unique security protections, and also they will have some unique security vulnerabilities in the real world.
Right. Yeah, I get the point. So from the network security point of view, if I think of an IoT network, I have to always keep in mind that an IoT network would have these endpoints which are much lightweight compared to our standard computing platforms. So if I'm thinking of cryptology, then all those building blocks that we know of in cryptology, like maybe a very heavyweight public key algorithm and all, those do not really work all the time. So I would probably move towards more of a symmetric key authentication rather than an entire public key infrastructure for a lightweight node. So those are things that shift a lot depending on what you have as an infrastructure.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Just a quick question. I also understand that you're going to talk about a session in the network security part, in fact, on blockchain security. And then talking about, so what is the security aspect of blockchain?
Okay, so for blockchain security, I'm mainly going to cover security issues in the so-called decentralized applications. So you can also consider that as a part of application security. So as, for example, these mobile applications are running on mobile phones. So these decentralized applications are running on blockchains. So people use these decentralized applications to do, for example, auction, to do voting. So nowadays, some government even start to use it to manage identity informations. So this is starting to get a lot of attention. But same as other applications, so they have vulnerabilities when the application is not developed to the high security standard. So there can be human errors when the developers code these applications, they make some mistakes. This leaves a lot of space for the malicious attackers to take advantage of it. So for example, with, so I think in a year or two back, there's this very infamous attack called the DAO attack. So DAO, which actually stands for the Decentralized Autonomous Organization. So this is like you're building an organization based on this DApps. So the error happened in the DAO contract, actually resulted in a really huge financial loss. If I remember correctly, it would be $60 million, I guess. So there are a lot of money involved in this kind of applications. So in the blockchain security session, I'm going to mainly go through some of these interesting security aspects in smart contract. So smart contract is used to actually power these decentralized applications. I'll be talking about the common type of vulnerabilities and how you detect them and maybe how you fix them.
Lovely. Okay, so I understand. So from an industry point of view, if I am somebody who wants to run an auction, let's say, on smart contracts on the blockchain, is there a tool that I can use to find out if my smart contract is vulnerable? And how do I even go about that kind of an audit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so so the security analysis for smart contract is still in its really early stage. So there are a bunch of auditing companies where they do this manual auditing. So they have a collection of security experts. So you can send your contract to them and they can review it for you and they can highlight what are the potential threats and then you can go and fix it. And we here in the cybersecurity lab at NTU, we actually developing some tools, security analysis tools, both dynamic and static. So dynamic means I'm generating a lot of test inputs, and I see if it triggers any security vulnerabilities. We have a tool called Voltron, which is targeting those issues I just mentioned for the DOL contract. And actually, another aspect we're looking at, which is really relevant for auction, so that is fairness. So apart from security, we also care about fairness. So fairness means the same auction might be unfair to certain participant. So if the participant do not understand enough about how the contract works internally, and they enter the auction, and they thought that they will get a high chance to get this this item he's asked for, but probably there's certain hidden rule embedded in the auction contract that the participant is not clear about, and they can get unfair treatment. They can get unfair result even if he paid, for example, the same amount of money. Yeah, so those are the things that we're looking at, and we are actively doing research in this field, and we've developed also a few automated tools to help to find these kind of issues.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I get the idea. So say when I'm talking about the network security, for example, I would say that if somebody knows about the standard network operations, if somebody has worked as a network administrator for some time, then we can always introduce to them what are the security aspects that come into those standard network protocols. So they may already be familiar with network protocols in their day-to-day job. And we just go into more details about the vulnerabilities or what would be the cryptographic mechanisms required for fixing them. So in case of say applications like this, or say the decentralized applications on smart contract, would you say that somebody coming from a background of software testing or software verification, would they be able to get some of these ideas intuitively and learn it further?
Yeah, sure. So actually, decentralized application, and no matter what application that I've been talking about, so they are actually very similar in its core. So for example, smart contracts written in those programming languages, for example, Solidity, which has a really similar syntax as JavaScript. So if you are, for example, have a background of web application, then it's very easy to understand how this smart contract works. If, for example, you have a background in software testing, you're familiar with C and C++, I would say you can understand smart contract easily. I think, and what we are going to focus on in our teaching in the course is the general principle, of course. So for example, when I'm going to talk about security testing, I'm going to look at those general principles, for example, black box testing, white box testing, fuzzing, and sorry, the lights turns off in my office. Yeah, so I'm going to focus on the general principles rather than the specifics of different platforms. So you can easily transfer what you learn into the field that you are most interested in.
Makes sense. Thank you. I mean, I think that would be most generic in general. One question for Prof. Lam. Prof. Lam, are you there?
Yes.
Hi, Prof. So I get this question a lot from our students as well as I think we're getting it from the participants. So when we teach the basic tools or the generic principles as E pointed out. So when you go to the industry, what kind of jobs are there and what skills are they really looking for?
Okay. First, as I always emphasize, cybersecurity or security is a field that you cannot ignore the reality. You cannot just go theoretical. Because as I always emphasize, security itself is meaningless until you know what you want to protect. And security as a concept cannot exist on its own. When you say security, it can mean your own personal security. It can mean the security of your money. It can mean the security of your computer. It can mean the security of your data. But security on its own doesn't make sense. You have to come with something else. And this something else are usually related to some real world asset or real world systems. So that's why when we learn security, we always need to strike a balance and ideally learn both the concept as well as how it exists in real world and what are the problems that you want to solve in real world. Now, going back to the point about what type of job, and it also depends on after you learn about the basic security concepts or the important security concepts, what are the other application domain you want to apply to? Whether it's the security of the database, whether it's the security of the network, or whether it's the security of your financial transactions. So eventually how you mold your knowledge in terms of security as a core concept and applied to an application domain, then it will more or less determine what type of job or which area you're going to work on. So choosing the application domain is very important. But then on the security concept itself, as usual in any computer science discipline, in any computer science top subjects, we always emphasize this thing called level of abstractions. Which level you're talking about? Even if you talk about programming, it can be the assembly language programming, it can be the higher level programming, or even this graphical programming. So it really depends on which level. And then it will determine what type of job you're going to do, even in that particular domain, like banking. So, for example, if you take our course for the purpose of knowing what's going on in security, knowing what are the building blocks in security, then most likely you will be a user in the banking systems. That you may not be the one that's going to design the security or analyze the security. But if you go one level deeper, you understand the abstraction of different security concepts. For example, cryptography. You learned about cryptography before, for example. It is not just about the mathematics. For most of the security designer, you don't need the mathematics. You just need to know the characteristics, the functionalities of a cryptographic technique. For example, encryption, for example, decryption, digital signature, hash function. You need to know this abstraction so that you can apply to design your security systems. So if you are a security architect, or if you are a security designer, then you need to know this level of abstraction. But if you say, well, after learning this, I'm so fascinated by the concept, so I want to go deeper, I want to learn the mathematics. Then when you go deeper and you understand all the mathematics, you can manipulate the mathematics, and you can do the analysis of the cryptographic algorithms. Then the level of question you deal with will be completely different. It's not about using the cryptographic technique to design a security system. It's really to ask, if I use this cryptographic technique, how many years it will be safe for? So it is this type of analysis. And once you know how many years that you will be safe for, then you will do the risk assessment, the risk analysis to balance what is the computing overhead and what is the security that you are safe for. So again, depending on the level of abstraction, I won't say where this level of depth, it's all required in-depth understanding, but it's the level of abstraction that determines what you're going to do in the organization. So it is security itself, and then apply to which industry domain or which problem statement. Then determine whether you work for a bank or you work for government or you work for a network company, for example. And then with the level of abstraction, that determines whether you're going to be a security user, security architect, or a protocol and analysis person, or protocol designer, algorithm designer. Then it will be different types of job. So it gives you a two-dimensional perspective to what you can learn and what you can do in this cybersecurity industry or in this profession. And just sidetrack a bit. And in fact, what I would like to achieve in this session is I want to show you, apart from telling you how to map this two-dimensional perspective of security knowledge into your future career in cybersecurity, but also I would like to highlight this point, that is, we don't need slide, we don't need PowerPoint, we don't need mathematical equation, and we can still explain security in such a way that you will understand and how it is relevant to your work and to your career. Okay.
Thank you, Prof. Yeah, this is something that we often have a misconception about. I think you cleared that doubt out. It's really, really crucial to understand the levels of abstraction that we go in, and that defines along with what job we are going to do. So for example, in crypto, we always, when we studied crypto as a mathematical discipline, I think some of the participants already saw that last time, you would go into something like a hash function in its very detailed structure. So that's what you do. This is all the levels of algorithm that goes in and so on. But suppose you are working in a bank, you would be just caring about that the hash would give you random outputs, and then you can pass in an input to get something of a random output based on that. So it's like a function. So it's going to be specific, unique based on the input. But if you change it slightly, it changes abruptly. Okay, so that's how much you need to know about a hash. If you're in a bank, where do you use it? You're probably going to use it in authenticating messages, more like one-time passwords. So if you're designing a one-time password, you care about that hash not giving you weird outputs. You want a timestamp to be passed, and you want a unique output based on the timestamp. You've got a time-locked one-time password. Then if you go into blockchain, what he was talking about, there you are using hash for a completely different purpose. You have a unique output from it. So if you change the input, it changes. That gives you immutability in a blockchain context. If I go for a two-party authentication in case of an IoT system design, I can always have a symmetric authentication scheme based on some sort of a hashing underneath. Or I can think of a public key infrastructure in my session, more on network security, and I can do digital signatures on top of hashing messages. So it depends on which application you're looking at. And it doesn't matter that you need to know exactly what model of hash you're using, all right? We will, of course, talk a little bit about what are the current standards. So suppose what's an FIPS 1402 or 1403 when I'm talking about the network security, which tools you have in the cryptographic arsenal that you can use. But we'll go and connect to something that I have in a question right now. Would you go into ISO 27001 or 2 or 3, this kind of regulatory side, if you're coming from an audit background? Sure, that would be more on the security regulations and security management. That would most likely be our last course in this series that we call 105. So that would be how to manage security. We'll probably have people from the industry and banking sectors and so on to guide you about the security management aspects. All right. So just to clarify what we are coming from or which direction we are coming in. So in the 3 sessions that we're going to have next, the technical sessions as we call them, application security, network security, and system security, will go to a certain level of abstraction. And then finally tying it together, all of it into the regulatory framework and management would be 105. That's our last course, right? Okay. So just a quick question, Tianwei. I just recalled that you are probably going to talk about bigger systems, like something like a cloud security as well.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
How do you even go about it? Generic abstraction, my target is cloud security. What do I do?
Cloud security, I will more discuss this direction in a practical view. So because cloud computing system has been widely adopted in the industry, like this technology starts like in 15 years ago, and now it is pretty mature. And during the development of this technology and also the cloud computing systems, we do have witnessed a lot of security incidents. And also we also have come up with different solutions to fix these incidents to make the system more secure. So basically in this course, I will try to review the development of the cloud computing systems from the security view and try to understand how the security mechanisms are applied and used in the cloud computing systems.
Great, thank you. So I have another question, which is kind of controversial. I'm going to restate the question. When you look at hacking from a general point of view, say if you're looking at an application and people say you hack it, what you're really breaking? Are you breaking the underlying cryptography, the maths? Or are you breaking the implementation? Or are you breaking the usage of it? What's your take on that?
I think there are different kinds of hacking. They're also at different level. So from the application security point of view, the kind of hacking is to provide the application some bad input, not expected by the app developer. For example, you may have heard about these code injection attacks.
Yeah.
Like SQL injection. So for example, the app is expecting only a username, which is a string of English letters. However, the attacker or the hacker, they can try to be smart and they can try to embed some computer commands or instructions within that input. So if you're not doing a proper sanitization, not doing a proper filtering, those commands will lead through as a username, and then the commands will be taken by your application and do something unexpected. So those are the kind of hacking we will mainly looking at in the application security session. Yeah, probably right. the hacking in the system level might be different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that makes sense. The system level would be different. So which part of security would stop this? Is it designing the system? Is it more of the policies or regulations? What's your take on that from a system side, Tianwei?
I think the most case of most of these vulnerabilities that can be exploited by the hackers is due to the misconfiguration of the system admins, because so currently we have pretty mature and also strong security mechanisms like crypto, like the signature protection, hash protection, and also access control. So they have a strong theory to support them. But unfortunately, some systems admins they may not configure them correctly, and then this leaves the open space for the adversaries to break into the system. And also, one possibility is that because sometimes these security mechanisms and also this knowledge is it's really hard to understand, and also it's hard to configure because we have different combinations of configurations, and we also need to consider different cases. And due to this complexity, so it is really hard to achieve a very strong protection, even the theory is pretty mature. This is right. A dilemma between the theory and also the practicality.
Absolutely. I mean, I see that all the time, even from a network security. So we say this cryptography is 128-bit secure, 256-bit secure, whatever that may mean, right? And then you see a public key infrastructure, which gives you a signature or encryption mechanism, which is maybe 128-bit secure. And you're doing a symmetric key encryption on top of it, which is double 256-bit secure. you're not configuring it properly. It would always be the weakest link in the chain that would be the target. So you need to make sure that these security definitions sort of match up, right? There's a lot of these regulations or policies that talk about it as well.
Yeah.
Right.
So another issue is like some users also do not use, customers do not use the security protection correctly. The simplest example is like a password. Even like we have the strong protections with the password, some users always choose the simple password like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So which is easier for the adverse to guess and then break into the system. And the theory cannot help in this case.
Right, right. Absolutely. So I think from our course, this NTC course series, at least we'll cross the first level of abstraction for people to understand what security really means and how do you even use it properly to start with.
Yeah.
If you're interested, the technical sessions, if you dig deeper a little bit, you can always go at the second layer of abstraction, which is maybe maintaining the system, being an administrator. The third would be the designing perspective, which would probably require more technical knowledge. But up to that admin level, up to knowing what to do, should be fairly fine, right? From any background, you can learn that. Okay, I think it's a good conversation. Thanks a lot to all three of you for being a part. Maybe we open it up to the audience to see if we have questions, maybe less controversial questions. Tianwei, I have a question for you from the audience. Which cloud services are you planning to use as reference when we talk about cloud security?
So we will discuss the mainstream cloud providers like the Amazon Web Services. So I worked at Amazon Web Services for 2 years as a software engineer, so I'm pretty familiar with this. But we also consider other services like the Amazon, like Microsoft Azure, and also like Google Cloud Computing platforms. And generally, these platforms are quite similar because they are competitors. So each time when one provider release a new service, so other companies will quickly learn it and then publish similar services. So they share a lot of similarities. Yeah.
Thanks, Tianwei. Do we have any other question? If you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and speak up. That's fine as well. Maybe I ask a filler question to Tianwei. So you said you worked with AWS for about 2 years.
Yeah.
And then I understand your thesis, your PhD is also on cloud security.
Yeah.
How different is academic knowledge versus working with the industry in this area?
Okay, so the biggest difference is sometimes from the academia when we discover some vulnerabilities, even we have proved it in the real cloud scenarios, but the cloud providers may not take a very serious attitude towards this. So because sometimes these threats are not quite practical. So this is a main concerns between the academia and also the industry. So generally, when we design new attacks from the perspective of research, we do not consider too much about the attack cost. So if we succeed, and then we win the game. But sometimes in the industry, we more care about the attack cost and also the applicability of this attack. Sometimes, like the adversary may spend too much cost to perform the attacks, to conduct the attacks, which may not be a very severe problems for the cloud provider to consider. Yeah,
I understand.
Yeah, this is one big advantage. Another one is generally like in the commercialized cloud providers. So the mechanism behind it is very confidential. For instance, like when we launch cloud services like virtual machines, and then the cloud provider will allocate virtual machines on different servers. So like when we do research, we assume that this scheduling policy is public and it's simple, but actually in the real cloud scenarios, so this is very confidential because disclose of this information can lead to severe attacks. So this is another protection, secure protection that the commercialized cloud providers focus on.
Right, makes sense. Thank you, Tianwei. Do we have any question from the audience? For anybody in the panel, please feel free to write your question in the chat box or speak up. Okay.
I want to say something about this to respond to this question. Which country has the highest number of hackers? I'm not going to answer this, but I want to make a comment on this. You can never answer these questions because you don't even know where the hackers are. Because in the internet, in the cyberspace, it's borderless, and people can hide their identity, hide their whereabouts. And even though there is a victim, and the victim can identify themselves, of course, and report to the police, for example. And when it comes to tracking the source of the attack, a seasoned hacker will not just go to hack you from home. It won't. So you will not know where they are. A seasoned hacker most likely will hack to one place, and then from there go to another place, probably or most likely in another countries, and then hack to the third place in yet another country, and eventually get to you. So that's why people always talk about in cybersecurity, it needs international collaboration in order to be able to track the hackers. So at this point, it is still difficult to say where the hackers come from. And therefore, it's almost impossible to say which country has the highest number. But if we just look at the first layer, I use the term layer again. Let's say you run a company and your company server is hacked, and then you report to the police just look at the IP address and then go to the source of the IP address and say this is a hacker. And this is of course not right because they themselves most likely are hackers, are victims as well. And also if we oversimplify the investigation this way, most likely countries with very good connectivity like us will be disadvantaged because we are so well connected. We have under submarine cable, we have connectivity to so many countries. So that's why we need to have a better understanding of the nature of cyber attack. So the reason I pick on this question is not because I know the answer, but I know what is the view, what is the way to view this problem. So that's why, and it's still an ongoing area of technical development, but it definitely requires international collaborations so that if you, at the end of your investigation from one country, you go to a place which is already beyond your jurisdiction, then you need to collaborate with another organization or another institutions that is resided in another jurisdiction. Okay, and as I said earlier, most likely the source of your attack themselves is a victim as well. So most likely their law enforcement is also looking into the problem, and then they go to the next layer and next layer until you go to a place that either you already exhausted all the path or you really managed to get to the point, to the actual culprit. And this is also not impossible. And currently we're also looking into this possibility. When someone hack or a hacker hack into your system, most of the time they don't hack it for fun. They try to steal data, whether your customer database or your user login details. after they steal all your data, what do? Also not for fun, not to just to occupy their storage, they go to sell. So when they sell, where do they sell? They go to the dark web, or they go to somewhere to sell. And what is the reason to sell? What's the purpose of selling? Collect payment. So that's why even in cybercrime investigation, we are also talking about cyber physical. Because they can go to hack, get all your cyber, through the cyberspace, get your information, but at the end, they need to collect payment. And that will go back to the physical world. So that's why we start to see this collaboration. First is international collaboration and also the cyber physical aspect of security. So that's what I want to say.
Thank you, Prof. I think I'll touch upon a little bit of what you said in my network security class, but then we probably have somebody to talk about cyber crime as well. And then that would be a part of our last session. So the last course from this NTC seminar session would be touching upon the cyber crime aspect. You'll see in much more details how complicated the landscape is.
And security management as well. I saw a question on ISO 27001.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other question from the audience? Feel free to drop a note in the chat box or just speak up. Anyone? Some more on CS 105. So CS 105 is going to be our course on the security management aspect of things, regulations and guidelines, and then also about cybercrime and how things happen in that sphere. So we are going to talk more about the regulations aspect, looking at Singapore, but also the international side. We are going to talk about security management, mostly from an industry point of view. What are the security management life cycle and what are the stages in that? We're also going to talk, as Prof said, about cybercrime and how international collaboration helps in those areas and what's the motivation, plus what's the goal for cybercrime and how does it really look like. So that's roughly what CS 105 is going to cover. Again, 4 sessions, same as all the other courses.
So any prerequisite on linear algebra and things like that, or purely someone with non-technical background can attend?
Sorry, from academic or from calculus?
I mean, what sort of math background we might have? Because I attend the previous one, they talk about vector, talk about linear algebra. Yeah,
all right.
That would be really rusty. I got my degree 30 years ago.
Don't worry. So the thing is, well, quite honestly, from an academic point of view, when we start teaching or do a course on cryptology or something like that, we tend to shift a lot towards math. But we wanted to have this session or have this conversation to illustrate you don't really need to go into the mathematical details. From now on, the courses that we're going to have, the next 4, would be far more towards the practical side of things. We are definitely not expecting anyone to know, say, the 25-year-old background in linear algebra or discrete math. So that's not the goal. But because if you have done the crypto course, just keep in mind, if you're going to that level of abstraction, you will need it, but you do not need to. You always do not need to go to that level.
Okay, yeah, because
yes,
I'm more interested that, let's say I raise the case that what did this type of approach help us on prevent that this thing how breach, so those are the questions that from a layman like us we will ask. So what's the application? If we do it again, how would we do it better? Yeah.
Absolutely. I get your point. So sure. So at that point, we are looking at the top layer, as Prof. Lam said, right? So we are looking at the top layer and how the security is managed and what the regulation is. Then the next layer would be the components. We're probably going to talk about that as well. But the bottommost layer, the crypto, that was covered, but that would be not that depth of crypto that we're going to go in for the other courses. It's way more practical than that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
No problem. Thanks, Peter, for your question. That's a good question. What's the minimum prerequisite for a participant? From a mathematical point of view, I may answer that. We are not expecting you to come from a math background or from a pure, say, engineering background, for that matter. You do not need to know every detail. From the mathematical point of view, cryptography has already been covered. So that cryptography portion we are going to do in a much higher abstraction, just as components to be put together in network security or blockchain, for example. System security, I think Tianwei already mentioned. You do not need to know everything about every system. He's going to give you a primer on the topics he is going to cover anyway. Same was E's perspective, that application, you do not need to know, say, programming languages thoroughly. That's not the point. It's more like he's going to break down in terms of the programming languages when required, and he will talk about those, but you do not need to know all the basics. It's fine if you're coming from a practitioner's point of view. If you have been working in one or other domain in the industry, say if you're from a software perspective, you would probably appreciate E's application security more. If you have been doing network administration, or if you know about networks more, you'll probably appreciate the network security aspect more. If you're more from operating system or system administrative point of view, you'll probably understand and appreciate the Tianwei's session better. It depends on your orientation, but all the three sessions are going to assume that you do not come from either of those backgrounds. Hope that answers you, Shwele.
So for this coming classes, are we going to have the materials before the class started?
I believe so, yes.
Okay,
You should.
because there was some of the feedback at the early on, yeah.
Okay, all right. So next class is next Monday, if I'm not wrong, 7th and 8th. And it's going to be about system security, Tianwei, your sessions?
Yes. Next
You're
Monday.
on the first day, and then Tanken Boon on the next day on smart card security and tokens and banking wallets.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have any other question? Okay, Xiaofang, do you have anything else to share from NTC? We had a 1-hour conversation. It was lovely. I think if there is no other question, we can call it an end.
Oh, thank you. In fact, NTC do not have too much to share, but I think, just to highlight to the rest, this is a very rare opportunity. So that's why I hope you can, either yourself or your friends can sign in for the program. Yeah, you're mostly welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks a lot, Prof. Lam. Thanks a lot, Prof. Lee. Thanks a lot, Prof. ZHANG, for joining us.
Thank you.
It was a great conversation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you everyone for joining. If you have any question, I'm still around. You can drop in the chat box if you want. I'll try to answer. If you have a question regarding the course, feel free.